My son dropped me off at the nursing home. Get lost, you old bastard. I kept my mouth shut because in 3 days, I was set to inherit $17 million. Once I got it, I froze his credit cards and sold the house he thought was his. Then came the desperate calls. The sky over Columbus was the color of a dirty dishcloth, a bleak, uniform gray that promised a cold drizzle and delivered on it. I sat in the passenger seat of my own Buick LaCrosse, watching the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers push the miserable day back and forth across the glass. The silence inside the car was heavier than the clouds outside. My son Kevin had his hands clamped on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. At 48, he still had the slick, over-gelled hair of a man trying too hard to look 28, and the impatient, restless energy of someone who feels the world owes him something it has yet to pay up. In the back seat, his girlfriend Tiffany was a silent, looming presence. I could see her reflection in the rearview mirror, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her smartphone. She was scrolling, endlessly scrolling, her thumb moving with a mechanical precision that made it clear her goal was to ignore my existence entirely. They hadn't said more than 10 words to me since we left my house, the house I'd lived in for 30 years, the house where I'd raised Kevin after his mother passed. Then, the car slowed. Kevin made a sharp turn, and a large institutional brick building came into view. A discreet sign on a patch of unnaturally green lawn read, Oakwood Senior Residence. The name sounded pleasant, like a place you'd go to play bridge and enjoy your golden years. The building itself looked like a low-budget community college from the 1970s, with rows of identical windows that stared out like vacant eyes. The air, even from the car, suddenly seemed thick with the scent of disinfectant and boiled vegetables. Kevin put the car in park right at the curb, not even bothering to pull into a designated space. He popped the trunk with a button on the dash. "All right, we're here." His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. He got out and yanked my single suitcase from the trunk. One suitcase. My entire life, the photo albums I couldn't bear to leave, the worn-out sweaters my wife had knitted for me, the few books I reread every year had been condensed into a single piece of luggage, as if I were going on a short vacation instead of being permanently filed away. I got out of the car slowly, my old joints protesting the damp cold. Tiffany didn't even look up from her phone. As I stood on the curb, the drizzle starting to dampen the shoulders of my coat, Kevin shoved a thick sheaf of papers into my hand. They were folded into a legal-sized envelope. "Sign these," he snapped, his voice sharp with irritation. "It's just the power of attorney stuff we talked about. Gets me access to manage your accounts and the house." I looked from the papers to his face. His eyes were cold, hard little pebbles. There wasn't a flicker of regret, no sadness, not even a hint of conflict. Just impatience. He wanted this over with. "And don't call unless it's a real emergency," he continued, leaning in slightly, his voice dropping to a low hiss. "Better yet," and here his lip curled into something that was almost a sneer. "Just get lost. You're on your own now, you old bastard." A hot, stinging wave of shock and pain washed over me. I felt my chest tighten, my breath catch in my throat. This was my son, my boy. But the man in front of me was a stranger, a cold, cruel stranger who was throwing me away like a piece of trash. Something inside me wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand he look me in the eye and see the father he was discarding. But I didn't. I held his gaze, let him see the frail, defeated old man he wanted to see, and I gave a slow, deliberate nod. That was all he needed. He turned on his heel, got back into the Buick without a backward glance, and sped away, the tires squealing softly on the wet asphalt. I stood there, motionless, until my car, his car now I supposed, disappeared around the corner. The drizzle turned into a steady, miserable rain. The papers in my hand grew damp, but I wasn't feeling the cold. My mind was 3 days in the past, in my quiet kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear. It was a call from a lawyer in California, a man named Mr. Davies. His voice was calm and professional as he informed me that my older sister Eleanor had passed away peacefully in her sleep. We hadn't spoken in nearly 20 years, not since a bitter argument over something so stupid I couldn't even remember what it was. A wave of old, forgotten grief had hit me then, but it was followed by a tidal wave of pure shock. "Mr. Peterson," the lawyer had said gently, "I'm the executor of your sister's estate. Her will is quite straightforward. She's named you as her sole heir." I'd mumbled something incoherent, thinking he meant her small house in La Jolla, maybe a few $1,000s in savings. "The total value of the estate, after all taxes and fees," he continued, "is estimated to be a little over $17 million. $17 million. The words had hung in the air, unreal. The will was to be officially executed and the funds transferred in exactly 1 week. That was 4 days ago, which meant I had 3 days left. 3 days until I was a multi-millionaire. I hadn't told Kevin. Something had stopped me, a quiet, ugly suspicion that had been growing in my gut for years. I'd wanted to believe he loved me, but I'd heard him on the phone with Tiffany the night before the lawyer called, his voice dripping with condescension. "Yeah, we're finally getting the old man taken care of," he'd said. "Once he's in the home and I have power of attorney, the house will finally be ours to sell. We'll be living it up in no time." He thought my net worth was the value of my paid-off 4-bedroom house and my modest pension. He saw me as the final obstacle. So I decided to let him play his hand. I would let him show me exactly who he was when he thought I had nothing left. I looked up at the grim facade of the Oakwood senior residence, then down at the papers in my hand. He wanted power of attorney? He wanted the house? He wanted me to get lost? A strange sense of calm settled over me, pushing aside the pain. The cold in my bones wasn't just from the weather anymore. It was a shard of ice forming in my soul. This wasn't a prison. It wasn't the end of my life. I wasn't a frail, defeated old man being left to rot. I was a man with a $17 million secret, and this drab, depressing building wasn't a tomb. It was a waiting room, my own private theater box, from which I would watch the final act of my son's greed play out. I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and walked through the sliding glass doors, not with despair, but with the cold, calculating patience of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The first 24 hours inside Oakwood senior residence were a masterclass in sensory deprivation. The place smelled of industrial-grade cleaner and boiled cabbage, a scent that clung to the back of your throat. My room was a small beige box with a bed that had a mattress thinner than my patience, a wobbly nightstand, and a single vinyl-upholstered chair that sighed every time I sat in it. The window overlooked a gravel service alley and a row of overflowing dumpsters. It was a perfect metaphor for how my son saw me, something to be tucked away out of sight, left to decay. But for me, it was a front-row seat to my own liberation. Tick-tock, 71 hours to go. While I was settling into this purgatory, I could practically hear the party starting back at my house. My house, the one I'd bought with 30 years of teaching salary, the one where I'd raised Kevin, where his mother and I had planted the oak tree in the front yard. I pictured Kevin and Tiffany clinking glasses in my living room, his slick friends slapping him on the back. "Finally got the old man taken care of," he'd be saying, his voice oozing with self-congratulation. I imagined them tracking mud on the carpets my late wife Helen had picked out, using her favorite serving dishes for their snacks, their laughter echoing in the halls where I could still hear my son's first steps. The thought didn't burn me with sadness anymore. It now felt like fuel, stoking the cold fire of my resolve. My days fell into a monotonous rhythm. Breakfast was watery oatmeal. Lunch was a mystery meat patty. But in this sea of bleakness, there were 2 unexpected islands of humanity. The first was a nurse named Maria. She was a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, with tired eyes but a smile that hadn't yet been worn down by the system. While other staffers would just drop the tray and leave, Maria would linger for a second. "How are you holding up, Arthur?" she'd ask, her voice genuine. She'd fluff my pillow without being asked, or bring me an extra packet of sugar for my coffee. She saw a person, not a chore. That small dignity was worth more than gold. My second discovery was Stanley. I found him in the common room, sitting in front of a chessboard, playing against himself. He was a small, wiry man with a shock of white hair and glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked up as I approached, his gaze sharp and assessing. "You play?" he grunted. "I used to," I said, pulling up a chair. "Been a while." "Everything's been a while in this place," he said, moving a bishop. "I'm Stanley." Turns out, Stanley had been a CPA for 45 years, a numbers guy, a man who understood assets and liabilities. On the second day, as we were staring at the faded floral wallpaper, I decided to test the waters. "Hey, Stanley," I said, keeping my voice casual. "You being an accountant and all, I've got a hypothetical for you." He adjusted his glasses. "I'm all ears. Hypotheticals are more interesting than the jello here." "Okay, let's say a friend of mine, an older guy. He's about to come into a significant amount of money, unexpectedly. But he's got, let's call them relatives, who have been taking advantage of his finances for a while. What's the first thing he should do to protect himself?" Stanley didn't even blink. He tapped his finger on the arm of his chair, a rhythmic tick, tick, tick. "First, he doesn't tell a soul, especially not the relatives. Second, he opens a brand new bank account at a completely different bank, untraceable link to his old life. Third, the moment the funds clear, he transfers every penny into that new account. Fourth, and this is the important part," he leaned in conspiratorially, "he cuts off every single line of credit and financial connection the vultures have to him. Cards, joint accounts, everything. Report them as compromised. It's cleaner that way. Let the bank's fraud department be the bad guy. You create a firewall so absolute it's like he never existed. Then you get a good lawyer and a good realtor. You don't pull the rug out from under them. You vaporize the entire floor." I nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. Vaporize the entire floor. I liked the sound of that. "Good advice, Stanley," I said. "My friend will appreciate it." Tick-tock, 26 hours to go. The outside world intruded only once. On the afternoon of the second day, a staffer came to tell me I had a phone call. It was Kevin. I walked to the communal phone at the nurse's station, purposefully making my steps slow and shaky. "Dad?" His voice was clipped, impatient. Not a, "How are you?" Not a, "Are you settling in okay?" "Kevin? Is that you, son?" I made my voice sound weak, confused. "Yeah, it's me. Listen, did you sign those papers I gave you? The power of attorney? I need them. Tiffany and I are out of town, and it would make things a lot easier." Out of town. I knew exactly where they were. I'd seen the pending charges on my online bank statement before I left. 2 first-class tickets to Los Angeles. Rodeo Drive. The brazenness of it was almost impressive. I let out a long theatrical sigh. "Oh, the papers, right. You know, I can't seem to find my reading glasses. The print is so small on those things. I must have misplaced them in the move." I could hear him hiss with frustration on the other end of the line. "Can't find them? Dad, it's a simple signature. Can't you just ask a nurse to read it to you?" "Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't want to be a bother. They're all so busy here," I said, my voice trailing off into pathetic helplessness. I glanced over at Maria, who was diligently updating a chart, and felt a pang of guilt for even pretending she wouldn't help. "For crying out loud," he snapped. "Useless. It's always something. Fine, just find the glasses. I'll call you tomorrow." The line went dead. I hung up the phone, my hand steady. He didn't call me useless. He called the role I was playing useless. The harmless, clueless old man he wanted me to be. He had no idea who he was talking to. He was arguing with a ghost, a fiction I had created to give him enough rope to finish the job himself. I walked back to my room, the beige box that was my command center. I had another chat, hypothetically, with Stanley about fast-closing real estate deals. He told me all cash offers were king and could close in days, not weeks. Check. I used the ancient library computer to find the top-rated real estate agent in my Columbus neighborhood. I sent a simple email. Check. That night, I couldn't sleep, but it wasn't from anxiety. It was anticipation. I lay on the lumpy mattress, staring at the ceiling, feeling the power shift. For my entire life, I had played by the rules, provided for my family, been the responsible one. And in return, I was being discarded. Kevin and Tiffany were probably asleep in a lavish $1,000-a-night hotel room in Beverly Hills, dreaming of Porsches and bigger houses, all funded by me. They were celebrating the end of my life, my relevance. They had no idea they were really at the very end of their own. The sun was about to rise on the third day, my day. The morning of the third day dawned just as gray and bleak as the day I'd arrived. Outside the single-pane window of my small room, a persistent Ohio drizzle slicked the asphalt of the parking lot, making the world look like a washed-out photograph. For 2 days I had been a ghost, a number, a resident of room 21B. I ate the bland food, listened to the distant drone of a television in the common room, and spoke only when spoken to. I played my part to perfection, the confused, frail old man cast aside and forgotten. But inside, a clock was ticking, counting down the seconds with the precision of a Swiss watch. At exactly 9 a.m., just as Maria was dropping off my morning pills, my worn-out flip phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a California area code. My heart didn't race. Instead, a profound, icy calm settled over me. This wasn't a moment of surprise. It was a moment of activation. "Could you give me a moment of privacy, Maria?" I asked, my voice still holding a hint of the tremor I'd been feigning. "It's personal." She gave me a kind, understanding nod and quietly closed the door behind her. I took a deep breath, letting the institutional smell of antiseptic and overcooked broccoli fill my lungs one last time. Then I flipped open the phone. "Arthur Peterson," I said. "Mr. Peterson, this is Daniel Davies, from the law offices of Albright and Finch in Los Angeles." The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "I'm calling to confirm that as of 8:55 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, the last of the estate's assets have been liquidated and the full amount, $17,243,000.58, has been successfully transferred to the new account you specified. The estate of Eleanor Peterson is now officially settled. The funds are yours." I closed my eyes. The weight of the last 3 days, no, the last 10 years, lifted from my shoulders. It felt like I'd been holding my breath underwater, and I could finally surface. The frail old man in room 21B dissolved, replaced by the man I used to be, the man I was about to become again. "Thank you for your efficiency, Mr. Davies," I said, and even I was surprised by the change in my own voice. It was clear, steady, and cold as iron. There was no quaver, no hesitation. "I trust all paperwork is in order." "Yes, sir. Everything is filed and complete. Congratulations, Mr. Peterson." I ended the call without another word. For a minute, I just sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, the phone feeling heavy and powerful in my hand. It was no longer just a phone. It was a scepter. My first call was to my bank. I didn't bother with the regular customer service line. I had the direct number for the Platinum Card Services fraud department memorized. "Fraud and asset protection, this is Sheila." "Hello, Sheila. My name is Arthur Peterson," I began, my tone calm and urgent. "I need to report all of my credit cards as stolen, effective immediately. They are to be frozen, and all associated authorized user accounts are to be deactivated." "Okay, Mr. Peterson, can you verify your mother's maiden name and your social?" I rattled off the information without a pause. "All right, I see 3 cards here," she said, tapping on her keyboard. "1 primary and 2 for an authorized user. A Kevin Peterson?" "That is correct. He does not have my permission to be using those cards. Consider them stolen. Freeze everything. I don't want a single purchase, not even for $1, to go through. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir. The accounts are now locked. No further transactions will be approved." "Excellent. Thank you for your help." I clicked End Call. 1 down. My next call was to a number I'd saved under the name L. Albright. Laura Albright was a high-powered real estate agent in Columbus I'd spoken to briefly the day before my son brought me here, framing it as a hypothetical inquiry about market values. "Laura Albright. Laura, this is Arthur Peterson. We spoke last week about my property at 452 Elm Street." "Oh yes, Mr. Peterson. I was hoping you'd call. The market is just incredible right now. Have you given any more thought to listing?" "I've done more than that," I said smoothly. "You mentioned you had a file of pre-approved buyers looking for a property just like mine. You specifically mentioned a young couple with an all-cash offer who were willing to move fast." Yes, the Hendersons. They're extremely motivated. They're willing to go 10% above asking and waive the inspection to close quickly." "Sell it to them," I said. There was a beat of stunned silence. "Sell it? Just like that?" "Mr. Peterson, we haven't even listed." "I don't want to list it. I want to sell it. Today. Accept their offer. Use the verbal agreement to drop the papers immediately. I'm giving you my official authorization. I want the house sold, cash in the bank, by the end of the business day if possible. Can you make that happen?" I could hear the frantic energy in her voice as the scale of the commission hit her. "An immediate all-cash sale, yes. Yes, Mr. Peterson, I can absolutely make that happen. I'll call them right now. I'll have the preliminary documents sent to you for an e-signature within the hour." "Good," I said and disconnected. And then I waited. I pictured the scene playing out 2,000 miles away. Kevin and Tiffany living it up in LA on my dime. They believed they had won. They believed I was neutralized, a non-entity locked away in a dreary room in Ohio. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet was about to vanish. The scene cut in my mind as clearly as if I were watching a movie. I imagined them in Beverly Hills, the California sun glinting off the chrome of a dozen six-figure cars. Kevin, puffed up with an arrogance he hadn't earned, pointing at a sleek silver Porsche. Tiffany, clinging to his arm, her eyes wide with greedy delight. They'd be laughing, oozing condescension for the poor salesman who had no idea he was in the presence of such new money. "We'll take this one," Kevin would say with a dismissive wave of his hand, slapping my credit card down on the polished desk. The salesman, all teeth and smiles, would run the card, and then his smile would falter. He'd run it again. "I'm sorry, sir," he'd say, the politeness barely masking his suspicion. "This card has been declined." Embarrassment, then anger, would flash across Kevin's face. "What? That's impossible. Run it again." The salesman would try, then shake his head. Flustered, Kevin would pull out the second card, the backup I'd given him for emergencies. Declined. Just as the hot flush of humiliation was reaching its peak, his phone would buzz. Not a call, an email notification. From Zillow. He'd frown, annoyed by the interruption, and glance at the screen. "Subject: Your listing has been updated. Congratulations! Your property at 452 Elm Street, Columbus, Ohio, is now marked as sold." I pictured his face. The confusion. The flicker of disbelief. The blood draining away, leaving his smug face a pale, waxy mask. The house. His house. The one he was so sure was his birthright, the key to his entire future. Sold. And right at that perfect, beautiful moment of shattering realization, his phone would ring. He'd look at the screen and see the name, Dad. He would answer, his voice a mix of fury and confusion. "What the hell is going on? Did you do something to the cards? And what is this email about the house?" I let him finish, listening to the frantic edge in his voice. Then I spoke. The frail voice was gone forever. What came out was a voice he had never heard from me before, low, controlled, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Having trouble with the cards, son?" Silence. A stunned, gasping silence. "And," I continued, letting each word land like a hammer blow, "I hope you weren't too attached to the house, the one I owned." The final pieces of his world clicked into place with an audible snap. The inheritance, the timing, my silence, his catastrophic mistake. It was all there, in the dead air between California and Ohio. I could almost feel the shockwave of it through the phone. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. "You told me to get lost," I said, my voice as cold as a tombstone. "It seems you're the one who's lost everything now." I ended the call. Click. After I hung up the phone, a profound quiet settled over my small room at Oakwood. It wasn't the usual oppressive silence of a nursing home after lights out. It was the clean, crisp silence that follows a storm. I had just dropped a bomb on Kevin's life, and for a moment, I could almost feel the shockwaves ripple all the way from Columbus, Ohio, to Beverly Hills. I pictured him standing there, phone in hand, his face a mask of disbelief. Then, I imagined the scene that would inevitably follow. I could see it in my mind's eye as clearly as if it were a movie playing on the beige wall in front of me. The furious turning on Tiffany, the accusations flying in that overpriced hotel suite. Her voice, probably shrill and dripping with contempt. "What do you mean, sold? What do you mean, the cards are frozen?" I could almost hear the click-clack of her heels on the marble floor as she'd start throwing her designer clothes into a suitcase, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. I pictured Kevin, pleading, then getting angry, his slick charm melting away to reveal the desperate, entitled man-child underneath. And then, the final, crushing blow. "You're a broke joke, Kevin." I imagined her sneering, her parting shot before slamming the door, leaving him alone with the consequences of his own greed. "I'm not going down with you." It took less than an hour for the first of the desperate calls to come. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I let it ring twice before picking up. "What have you done?" he snarled. There was no dad, no pretense. It was pure, unfiltered rage. "You can't do this. That's my house, my money. I'll sue you. I'll get a lawyer, and I'll drag you through the courts until you have nothing. You hear me, you old fool?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear, listening to his tirade with a strange sense of detachment. It was like listening to a toddler throwing a tantrum. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice low and steady. "Is that so, Kevin? Goodbye." I pressed the end call button and placed the phone back on the nightstand. There was nothing to argue about. The facts were the facts. The house was in my name. The accounts were mine. He was a guest who had overstayed his welcome. The second call came late that night, around 2 a.m. This time, the tone was completely different. It was whiny, manipulative, dripping with a fake sentimentality that turned my stomach. "Dad, it's me," he began, his voice thick with faux emotion. "Dad, how could you do this to me? To your own son? I did everything for you. I found you this place, made sure you were taken care of. And this is how you repay me. Tiffany left me, Dad. She walked out. I'm all alone in this hotel room because of what you did. Don't you even care?" I thought about his version of caring for me, leaving me on a curb with my one suitcase, telling me to get lost. The words echoed in my mind, a stark contrast to his pathetic whining now. "You made your choices, Kevin," I said, my voice as cold as the tile floor. "You treated me like a piece of old furniture to be discarded." It turns out that old furniture owned the entire house. I didn't wait for a reply. Click. The final call came the next morning. This was the one I was waiting for. It was the sound of complete, utter brokenness. There was no anger, no manipulation, just the raw, pathetic sobbing of a man who had hit rock bottom. "Dad, please," he choked out between sobs. "I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry. I messed up. I know I did. But I have nothing, nothing. The hotel kicked me out. My wallet is empty. I'm going to be on the street. Please, just a little something, a few $100s to get a bus ticket home. I'll pay you back, I swear it." I listened, unmoved. His apology wasn't born of remorse. It was born of desperation. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done, only for the fact that he'd been caught and had lost his piggy bank. I let his sobs fill the silence for a long moment. He had told me not to call unless it was a real emergency. Well, it sounded like he was having one. But it wasn't my emergency, it was his. I ended the call without saying a word and turned my phone off. The desperate calls were over. Later that afternoon, I had a special meal catered to the home. I invited Stanley to join me in the small private room I'd been using for my calls. Instead of the usual bland cafeteria food, we had thick, juicy ribeye steaks with all the fixings. Stanley's eyes widened. "Don't tell me your hypothetical situation just got a lot less hypothetical, Arthur," he chuckled. I smiled, cutting into my steak. "Stanley, my friend, let's just say I'm in a position to reevaluate my investments." As we ate, I made a call to the financial advisor who was now managing my estate. I want to establish an anonymous charitable trust, I said, keeping my voice low. The first designated beneficiary is a facility called the Oakwood Senior Residence. I want the donation to be earmarked for two specific things: substantial, immediate bonuses for every single staff member, and a complete overhaul of the patient amenities, including the food, furniture, and activities program. It was a start, a way to turn my pain into something good. But there was one more piece of business. The next day, I found Maria during her morning rounds, looking tired but, as always, having a kind word for everyone she passed. I asked her to step into the hallway for a moment and handed her a thick envelope. "Maria," I said softly, "you treated me like a human being from the moment I arrived. You showed me dignity and kindness when you had 1,000 other things to do. That's something I will never forget." She looked confused, opening the envelope slowly. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000. Her eyes shot up to meet mine, wide with shock, and then filled with tears. I don't understand," she whispered. "I overheard you talking about putting your kids through college and your dream of getting your master's in nursing," I explained. "Consider this a down payment on those dreams. Kindness should be rewarded, Maria. You are a good person, and good people deserve good things." She threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt a hug that was genuine, warm, and had nothing to do with what I could give, but with who I was. The weight of Kevin's calls, of his betrayal, finally lifted, replaced by a quiet, profound sense of rightness. I had finally started to invest in what truly mattered. The chaotic aftermath of Kevin's downfall wasn't something I witnessed firsthand, but I heard it all. A private investigator I hired gave me a brief, clinical report, just enough for me to know the lesson had been delivered. It all started, as I imagined, with pure, unadulterated rage. He and Tiffany had a screaming match in their Beverly Hills hotel suite that the front desk could hear 3 floors down. She'd called him a broke joke and told him she wasn't going to sink with his ship. She was gone within the hour, leaving him with a hotel bill he couldn't pay and the crushing silence of a life he'd just torched. From there, my investigator's report painted a bleak but predictable picture. Kevin, evicted from the high-end hotel, ended up in a dingy motel off some forgotten highway, the kind with flickering neon signs and sheets that felt perpetually damp. His Armani suits were traded for a grease-stained uniform at a car wash in the valley, a place where he used to get his own luxury sedan detailed. The irony was so thick you could almost taste it. He, who had bragged about taking care of the old man, was now scrubbing bird droppings off of other people's cars for minimum wage. He was a ghost haunting the edges of a life he thought was his by right. He had to start from absolute zero, without the safety net he'd so arrogantly shredded. For me, the days following the transfer were quiet and purposeful. My last morning at Oakwood Senior Residence felt surreal. I looked at the same beige walls, smelled the same scent of antiseptic and overcooked broccoli, but it was different. It was no longer a cage, but a waiting room I was finally leaving. I had my things packed, not in the single sad suitcase Kevin had brought for me, but in 2 brand new leather duffel bags. Dressed in a tailored navy suit that fit me perfectly, I walked down the hall feeling 10 years younger. The fabric was crisp, the shoes shined to a mirror finish. It wasn't about being flashy. It was about feeling like myself again, like Arthur Davies, not just some old man. I found Stanley in the common room doing a crossword puzzle. He looked up as I approached, his sharp eyes taking in my suit. A slow grin spread across his face. "Well, well," he said, setting his pen down. "Look at you. Headed to a board meeting or a wedding?" "Something like that," I chuckled. "Stanley, I came to say goodbye." He stood up and shook my hand firmly. His grip was surprisingly strong. "You play your cards right, Arthur. I knew that hypothetical talk wasn't just for kicks. Don't spend it all in one place, you hear?" "I'll do my best," I said, my voice thick with genuine affection. "Thank you for the company. And the advice." "Anytime," he nodded. "Now get out of here. This place is starting to look better now that you're leaving." We both laughed, a shared moment of understanding between 2 men who had found an unlikely friendship in an unlikely place. My next stop was Maria's station. She was busy updating a chart, a familiar furrow of concentration on her brow. "Maria?" I said softly. She looked up, and her eyes widened slightly at my transformation. "Mr. Davies, you're leaving?" "I am," I smiled. "But before I go, I wanted to give you this." I handed her a thick, cream-colored envelope. She took it hesitantly, looking from the envelope to my face. "What is this?" "It's a thank you," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "for treating an old man with dignity when no one else would, for bringing me that extra blanket without being asked, for your kindness. Kindness should be rewarded, Maria. Think of it as an investment in a bright future." She slowly opened the flap and pulled out the check inside. She froze. Her eyes scanned the piece of paper, and her hand went to her mouth. Her shoulders started to shake as silent tears streamed down her face. It was a sum that I knew would change the entire trajectory of her life. She couldn't speak, just stared at me with wide, grateful eyes. I simply gave her a warm nod, a silent acknowledgement that her compassion hadn't gone unnoticed. I didn't need words, her expression was all the thanks I needed. I walked out the front doors of Oakwood, the same doors I'd been shoved through just a week before. This time, there was no Buick speeding away. Instead, a polished black town car was parked at the curb, a driver in a crisp suit holding a small sign, Davies. The sun was bright, the Ohio sky a brilliant cloudless blue. The world felt new. Sliding into the plush leather of the back seat, the door closing with a soft, satisfying thud, I was finally able to breathe. The quiet hum of the engine was the sound of my future. Hours later, I was standing in the middle of the San Diego airport. The place was a river of humanity, a symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and 1,000 different conversations. I wasn't rushed. I wasn't trying to catch a flight. I just stood there, taking it all in. I looked up at the massive departure board, a flickering mosaic of destinations: Tokyo, London, Dallas, Honolulu. Honolulu, Hawaii. It sounded like peace. A genuine smile spread across my face, not a smirk of victory, but a simple, profound expression of freedom. Kevin thought my worth was tied to a house he could take and money he could spend. He never understood that a person's real value is the respect they command. Now, for the first time in a long, long time, I'm investing in myself. I took a deep breath, adjusted the collar of my suit, and began walking toward the gate.